Legal segregation doesn't exist anymore in the United States, but does segregation still exist psychologically? In this episode of The Uncomfortable Truth, we're going to explore just that. This conversation was part of a previous episode titled Two Americas, which explored LeVon Brown's early life growing up in Mississippi. However, I felt this part of the interview merited its own episode as we dove into a deeper discussion about the psychological separation of white and black America today. I'm going to roll back the proverbial tape just to when the previous discussion ended, and we're going to pick it up from there. This is Loki Mulholland, and it's time to get uncomfortable.
And I was scared because a lot of times we would travel at night because we had to be wherever we were going the next day. People had to see us because they were afraid. So we had to show them that we weren't. And I was, like I said, I was 16 years old.
And jumping out of windows with the Klan coming after you.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit of my life, and that's how I grew up.
But there was this, but you were around white people. You had to be around white people all the time.
Yes.
In Mississippi.
Yes.
And yet there is this clear psychological separation.
No, it was clear psychologically and physically.
Well, yeah, except for when you went to a store or whatever else, but they designed ways to try to keep things separate within stores or in a hospital or you know the waiting rooms and these sort of things everywhere. But even psychologically, you know, there's creating this barrier. Now today we don't have the physical separation in respects of, like, you know, everyone goes to the same movie theaters and these sort of things. You know, unless you know, you're not going to go to that neighborhood theater because you don't live there or whatever.
Correct.
But there's nothing to keep you from going there per se.
Right.
Except psychologically.
Right. That is correct.
And so we still have the psychological factor that plays in.
That still goes on. That still happens.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are towns still that you don't want to be in if you're black late in the evening.
Right.
You know, that there's still...
Well, there's black neighborhoods you don't want to be in if you're white.
Yeah, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, how many are there?
You know, like, you know, the hood, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah, right.
South side.
Yeah.
You know,
there are places that black people, that rich black people don't want to be in either, or middle class black people. Right. So there's a whole bunch of that.
Neighborhoods, period. Right.
But well, it's more than that.
I could go into any white neighborhood and blend in.
Correct.
Clearly.
That's correct.
You can't go into every single white neighborhood.
No, I cannot. Now, if I'm by myself.
You could barely be in your own neighborhood.
Well, mine is pretty good.
All right.
Mine is pretty good. But there's still too much. There's a lot of separation. A lot of it now is about class as opposed to race.
Mm-hmm.
I'll grant you that. Then it was all about race.
Right.
It was all about race. And so a lot of the stuff that we live on is the history of that we've gone through that has led to where we are now as black people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are mad about. So
and then so you have this America that you're living in.
Right.
And this is one of fear of subjugation, right?
Yeah. And as people die, it's
right.
It's not where the white people lived.
What was the other America that you saw?
It was the white America. It was now there were poor whites, obviously, and there were whites, but they always had over us that we were not white. Mm-hmm. So these were the people who would come after us in the dark, who cherished the Klan, who looked after. I mean, a lot of members of the Klan you would see during the day, they would come for you at night. Mm-hmm. So there was an America that had to do with going in and buying clothes. The poorest white guy could go into a store and buy clothes. Well, I couldn't. He could go into Woolworths to eat, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
That's the America they grew up. He could go see the movies, and I had to sit somewhere separate. he could go to the fair for 2 weeks, and I could go for a few days.
Yeah.
So there were all kinds of things, and that was America.
An Ordinary Hero was my first award-winning documentary. It's about the life of my mother, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland, and her participation in the civil rights movement. For most of us, our mothers are heroes because they're mothers, and mom is just mom. But when your mother's a civil rights icon, and yet you never really knew it, things change. Go check out An Ordinary Hero and find out how choosing to do what was right instead of what was easy helped change the world. You can find it on Amazon Prime, or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection.
Now, what I didn't know is that the poor white guy had his problems too. But to me, growing up, they didn't have any problems. And if they did have problems, they would always take it out on us.
Yeah.
The black guy. So I didn't grow up in that America. I grew up afraid. I grew up fighting. I grew up trying to find where I was going to live in this world. I didn't grow up. A white person is born knowing that they belong.
Mm-hmm.
We had to fight to belong. So that's the America that they grew up in, that you grew up in, that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
Even when the movement, they were killing people.
Yeah.
And all they were asking for was the right to vote, the right to go wherever they wanted to go, the right to live where they wanted to live. That's all they were asking for. So as I sit here now, I'm quite proud of where we've come as a race.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had to fight to get there. And we're still fighting.
Yeah. Now.
So that's what I meant.
Yeah. No, I got you. In the book White Fragility, the author says that white people don't see themselves as a race. That we basically define ourselves by how we define everyone else as other.
Right. But that's where this came from. That's where races came from.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, so what I'm saying is that, so you have this, so in the context of the world you grew up in then, is that the way these poor whites, or whites in general, were defining themselves was based on, well, at least I'm not black.
Correct.
So it's always
I'm better than them.
I'm better than them because society is showing me that I am, no matter how poor I am or anything else, at least I'm not black. And that you're seeing this contrast, so defining yourself against what you're seeing. So in today's society, I have to wonder, if whites still do the same thing based on what they see in the media, law enforcement, mass incarceration, all these different things. And it's like how they're defining themselves based on how other people are treated. We're putting immigrants into cages and so forth, and while we might not openly understand that and see that, we still define ourselves that way, and that this is our country.
Oh, most assuredly. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is all about the color of your skin. First of all, it's about fear, because white people think that black people are going to do what they do, what they did, rape and kill people.
Right.
That's one thing. That's one part of it.
Sure.
The other part is that it's a white country. It always has been. Right. And a lot of this stuff to do with immigration and where people live and the GI Bill and all that stuff has to do with people being black. People are still defining themselves that way. Why? Because there's a privilege attached to that.
Yeah. You
can walk down the street. You can go where you want.
Well, so can you. You can walk down the street. You can go where you want, Levon. It's America.
No. That's what I repeat, the America you live in is not the one I live in. Because I can't. Even today. And so those same people, that's who was in Charlottesville, whatever that town is, where Trump said there was good people on. That's who they were. What rich white
Right.
people don't fight. They
Right.
don't go in the army. They don't do anything. But being white grants you certain privileges, and they are afraid that we are 13% of the population. What the hell is there to be afraid of? 13%. So what's there to be afraid of?
My work has taken me to a lot of places, and I've been fortunate to meet some incredible people. But when I came to Selma and met Ann Blackman Bland, I knew I was in the presence of greatness. Joanne was 11 years old when she was attacked on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday in 1965. She wasn't old enough to vote, but understood its importance enough to be there. After Selma is an in-depth look at how our right to vote has eroded since the signing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The fight for the right to vote continues. Get informed. You can find After Selma on Amazon Prime or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection. So a black person walks into a store and white people look at him suspiciously. What are they doing here? Are they going to steal something? All these sort of things that start to trigger. But, if a white person is in a black neighborhood, for example, or walks into a store that's predominantly black, or in a situation where they are the minority, they're getting looks too. But is that a different look?
Well, yes and no. It's really just, what are you doing here? Can I help? It depends on where you are. First of all, let's be clear about something. It depends on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, if it's not a place where white people normally go, you like to get it. The white person is like to get a look that says, "Why are you here?
Right.
Are you looking for something?" The difference is when you walk into a space where I don't know if is such a thing as a white space in some areas, but certainly in mine, it's about, are you going to steal something? Are you here to get something from me? So you feel kind of you feel different. You might going into a black space. You might be afraid. You might be nervous because you've never been there before.
If I say white space, let me put it this way. For example, let me give a great example. All right, so if I drive through a black neighborhood, no one's calling the cops.
Correct.
Just for driving through it. Obviously, if I stop and pull out a gun and whatever,
Right,
that's a different equation.
Yes. Right.
But if a black person drives through a white neighborhood, the odds are greater that someone's calling the cops.
Particularly if they drive too slowly.
We had those kids in Texas who were swimming in the black kids who were swimming at a white swimming pool, just a couple summers ago, and and cops were brought in and people were slammed to the ground and these sort of things.
Yeah. Well, that's why I prefaced by saying it depends on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in New York, the chances are they will just look at you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're upstate New York, you might get accosted. What are you doing here, kind of thing. If you're in the South, things might happen to you. You might get, a black person goes into a neighborhood that's predominantly white. Sundown of town still exists.
Right.
So it depends on where and when, how you're treated. But from a personal standpoint, I think the person is more nervous. In other words, if I, as a black person, go through a neighborhood in Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi, I might be a little more nervous than the white person would be, because in some of the neighborhoods they can do things to you that the law might come, but you're the one that's in trouble, meaning the black person.
Right.
Whereas they generally won't bother a white person other than to ask, what are you doing here?
Right.
I think that's the difference. It's like what can happen to the individual.
Yeah. I mean, to go back historically, my mom, for example, when she went to Georgia as that 10-year-old girl, and on the dare from her friend Mary, they go to N Town. You can imagine what
Right,
the N stands for.
right,
Uh, and she said when she went, when her and Mary, both two little white girls, walked into the black quarters, uh, everyone seemed to disappear because
right,
no one wanted to be seeing those white girls.
right,
Because now, if something happened to them and the police were called, now this is 1950s Georgia.
right,
Someone's getting hung.
right. Everybody's in trouble,
Right.
and it was them that walked in, but everybody's in trouble.
This
Absolutely.
is the guilty. Guilty until proven innocent. But
Yeah,
really, you're just guilty and period.
right. Because you might do something to the white girl.
Right.
I mean, after all, isn't that what you've been waiting for?
Right. Yeah. In my other life, I'm a filmmaker, and one of my more fascinating films I created is the award-winning film titled Black, White, and Us. It's about viewing racism through the lens of transracial adoptions in Utah. Utah? Yeah, Utah. It just so happens to be the transracial adoption capital of the world. So what happens when white families who didn't believe racism existed anymore adopts a black child? Find it on Amazon Prime or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection.
It's things have changed somewhat,
Sure.
but it depends on where you are. My own daughter, sometimes is afraid being in New York
Sure.
when the police pull her over because we don't know if we got the good guy or the bad guy.
Yeah.
And usually you get the good guy, but you might not.
Yeah.
And they tend to look out for each other. So it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
Because now the difference is if those white girls go several times, they begin to get accepted.
Right.
There's still fear, there's still nervousness, but it's like they know where they are. They must belong here, or they feel they belong here. Now somebody will talk to them, either to tell them you're welcome, or if I were you, I wouldn't come here anymore.
Well, let me ask you this. In this day and age, I mean, we're talking about stuff that's, 1950s or 1930s and stuff, but, let's bring it to the present. I mean, um, the stereotypes still exist when we project on to African Americans, particularly African American men, right?
Right,
Thug and whatever else, and these sort of things where, you if you see a young black man walking towards you, you move to the other side of the street, these sort of stereotypes. If they come, whatever it is, um, it just seems to be ingrained in our mindset, meaning white America and even, African Americans today, uh, have that same mindset. Many of them about young black men.
right.
But is the idea that white people are up to something and can't be trusted until you prove me otherwise? That caution that exists.
I think it's still there. I think
Yeah.
the problem is, remember, I'm fond of saying this that we're all brought up in the same place
Right.
by the same people,
Right.
and I think it's ingrained in people.
Sure.
It used to be if you picked up a newspaper or you listened to TV, the only news that was on was the black guy hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a lot of black people that do hurt people.
Sure.
So, but we don't want to be honest about that. We don't want to say that. We as black people don't want to say that black people there are some criminals that will hurt you. And we don't want to say that because that traditionally was the only time that they talked about black people.
Right.
Now it's a lot of the musicians, they take on this look.
Right.
They want to be frightening. They They want people to be afraid of them. It's so ingrained that is what, it's sort of like saying, if that's the image you have of me, then that's who I'll be.
But again, that's also, but we're coming back to this idea of how we talked about this before, where the greatest purveyors of rap music is white kids, and so
Right.
they're being packaged and sold to an audience that that's feeding into that stereotype to begin with. But then there's also that your street cred and whatever else as a rapper.
Right. Yeah, but yes, but the white kid will do that to a certain age, and then they'll be somewhere else.
Sure.
And they won't go to the same clubs. They don't go to the same clubs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dichotomy that exists historically and even now.
Right.
Because people don't know what else to do. So the black kids resent the fact that that white kids made Kanye West.
Mm-hmm.
They that's one of them, but they resent the fact that that's what goes on.
Want a great way to help a worthy organization and educate children about the civil rights movement? Visit our foundation, the Joan Trumpauer Mulholland Foundation, at the JTMFoundation.org. That's the JTMFoundation.org. THEFoundation.org. We are a 501c3 established to help end racism through education. A $5 monthly recurring donation will provide curriculum for 30 students. As my mother used to say, I can't do everything, but I can do something, because doing nothing is not an option. If you have wanted to help in this cause, but didn't know how, now you can. The Joan Trumpauer Mulholland Foundation at the JTMFoundation.org. Right.
I don't know what causes that, except for historically, that's what went on.
Mm-hmm.
So people are still living with it.
Right.
It's okay for us to be entertainers, for us to be boxers, for us to be baseball players or football players, to entertain the larger society. But there are a lot of black people that didn't do that then and don't do that now. They're not the ones who get attention.
Right.
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 It's the thug. It's the it's the negative side of a race of people. The same thing happens with black people, that it is the negative side of white people that very often get noticed. There's a historically, there's been this treatment, this dealing with people at a distance, and it's even more so now than it used to be. So it because we don't know, because now we've stopped talking altogether.
Right.
Except to each other. And the people have started historically bringing stuff up that used to happen.
Right.
So people get blamed for that, when quite frankly they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. So if a white guy moves into their expectations, there are neighborhood expectations. For instance, if a black family moves in, everybody gets nervous because, oh my God, they're going to have more of them coming in.
Right.
Well, maybe not, because things have changed. Now you have black people with money, so they buy houses in white neighborhoods. But in their minds, in the white person's mind, is there's going to be a whole bunch of black people that move in here, and I'm not going to be welcome.
Right.
So you create these pockets of people that don't have a space for each other to talk to each other.
Right.
It's getting worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse, and it's getting worse because both of us, the black guy and the white guy, don't know how to start a conversation.
Well, and that's why we're having these conversations.
Well, yes.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, well, Levon, I once again, I truly appreciate it, and taking the time, and until next time.
All right. Well, I hope I've been helpful.
Yeah, always. Thank you again for listening. Make sure you head to my Patreon page at patreon.com/Loki Mulholland. Show a little love if you can, and get access to even more content. Until next time, Don't be afraid to get uncomfortable.